Hello, the internet. How we doing today, fellas? So, I've been watching the war in Ukraine closely for many years now. I'm sure as many of you have as well. And I've been trying to contemplate how much of that is due to their MET-TC specifically, and how much of that is just the new standard for modern warfare. Okay. I think that conventional warfare in the manner of mechanized, heavy infantry with like artillery and lots of machine guns and large fortifications all over the place, that is done, right. That was 1930 to 2020, and it has thoroughly been killed by the drone. However, I think that for the light infantry squad, it's much business as usual, or perhaps even back to the basics. I'll get into all this more in just a second, okay? I think that American and Westerners' view of how the war in Ukraine is going with drones is doubly skewed, yet there is truth to it. All right, first, what do I mean by doubly skewed? First of all the videos you're seeing are propaganda pieces put together by Ukraine of successful drone attacks. So it's already they're showing the most intense, most crazy looking, most successful attacks, and they're not showing you the whatever 9 out of 10 or whatever it is that weren't successful, the ones that didn't detonate, the infantry squad that the drones couldn't identify because they used vegetation properly, etc., etc. We don't see any of those. We only see the successful strikes. Also, if you watch any of these videos at length and you have any experience or knowledge, it's very obvious that these poor Russians are just like fucking clueless conscripts, okay? Even somebody just fresh out of boot camp or basic school of infantry is going to have a larger survival rate compared to the individuals I see dying in their propaganda videos. So that is one order of skewing towards drones being like the craziest thing ever. The other one is that the nature of this war in Ukraine is such that it's like the perfect storm for drones. Ukraine, they're fighting over a small piece of land, so they can't use maneuver warfare because they both want to physically occupy this one little tiny piece. The country itself is flat and farmland, so there wasn't much vegetation to begin with, and then the Russians and the Ukrainians artilleried the fuck out of everything, so what little there was is no longer standing for the most part. These are conventional militaries in the sense that they are governments, and they're organized and they're funded as such, but they are lower technology, right? This isn't America, this isn't Western Europe, this isn't China. So the technology level that they have is pretty low. All these things lend itself to people digging trenches and then drones flying around bombing those trenches, right? That's the pinnacle of what they can come up with. If a lot of those factors of the MET-TC were different, right? If the enemy or the friendly situation was different, if the terrain was different, if the overall mission and commander's intent was different, drones wouldn't be as prolific as they are in Ukraine. Okay, so point being, we don't need to all carry shotguns because drones are going to be the number one things that kill everybody in every war from here on forward. I don't think that's true. Right, just being a basic infantryman and existing in tunnels or buildings or vegetation and doing all the things you would already do to mitigate yourself from aerial satellites and spy planes and stuff like that for the last 50 years. If you do that, it'll be successful against drones as well. And I know that a lot of infantry in Ukraine are successful. We just don't see tons of propaganda videos about that. Okay. What drones have changed and destroyed is the fact that for relatively cheap compared to the price of an M1 Abrams tank or a F-35, we can make drones that are optical cable guided or autonomous so that jamming systems and stuff don't work on them. And we can make swarms of them, and we can swarm those. We can get those moved rapidly because they're small, right? It's not like moving a whole brigade of artillery, right? We can pack all these fucking drones up into a truck, drive that truck across the country in a day, and deploy them anywhere we want to, anywhere we need to, very rapidly, very successfully, very impossible to shoot down, right? The amount of funding and defense, right? You basically need a bunch of autonomous turrets, a bunch of those Sea Whizzes or whatever they have on ships to shoot missiles down. Like 10 of those at every fortified location you want to have at the front line to be able to shoot down drone swarms, and that's still not going to protect you every time always. So what this means is all of our super modern technology is now doesn't matter. Tanks don't matter, troop carriers, armored vehicles don't matter. Planes don't matter, helicopters don't matter, artillery doesn't matter. We're not going to have any large, massive barracks formations that are protected by sandbags and barbed wire and gates and machine guns, okay? Because that'll just get droned nonstop until it doesn't exist anymore. So everything within 10 to 20 miles of where the fighting is, wherever the fighting is going to have to be basically a squad of infantry or less on foot only, and they're going to have to utilize the fact they're on foot to go places drones can't, right? Dense vegetation, tunnels, inside of buildings. All right, so that's how they're going to mitigate the drone threat. So we're going back to Vietnam-esque, largely unsupported, very lightly logistically supported, light infantry on their feet all day, every day, moving around and fighting in that manner. Yep. The other thing is, I think that on deliberate attacks, right? The whole idea of like a platoon or a company deliberate attack is probably going to go away as well. Again, I'm talking about squad, maybe a couple squad sized, out on patrol, right, platoon or less. But the idea of getting a whole platoon supported on attack and having a support by fire with a fixed machine gun position, this might be more MET-TC dependent. There might be times and situations and places where you can get away with this, but if there is a heavy drone presence and logistical pipeline of drones in the exact area you're at, establishing a support by fire and expecting to man that place with machine guns for like 30 minutes or more is probably not going to work out well, because you're going to get fucking drone swarmed. So drone operators are going to be able to operate from a completely covered and concealed position, so you can't fix them, and they will be able to deploy their weapons on you, right? So that's going to be problematic. Right? Before there was mortars, and they could affect your indirect fire, your support by fire, but then you also had your mortars. To shoot a mortar, the mortar system itself has to be exposed. So you can suppress their indirect fire assets with your indirect fire assets, occupy your support by fire, suppress the direct fire assets, allow maneuver to maneuver. However, now drone operators can operate from down inside a concrete bunker, completely sealed up, right? Totally safe from everything, and they can still deploy their drones, which means we're not going to be able to have a stationary supporting element. Everybody's going to have to be maneuvering pretty often to mitigate being located and swarmed by drones, which will change tactics moving forward. So, boom, conventional warfare is dead. Drones have changed the game, though probably not as much as all you terminally online people think. But still, they've changed the nature of the game. See y'all in the next one.